Chris Bright,
Yeah.
welcome to the Grant Discourse.
Thanks, man. Good to be here.
So you're running for Congress,
CD1.
CD1.
Yes, sir.
And so are you from New Hampshire?
Well, I am now. This is the longest place I've ever lived somewhere. So I'm originally from New Jersey, but
Okay.
I left for West Point 5 days after high school, and then was in the military for a while. Moved around the country, and ultimately came back here in 2005. Been here ever since. So fell in love with the area and decided this was home. You know, when I knew I wasn't going to go back to New Jersey when I was getting out of the military. So kind of that was a neat process to go through. It was like, all right, you can go live anywhere in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Where should I go? So, you know, we looked at taxes, we looked at schools. You know, I'm an East Coast guy, and ultimately fell in love with this area. And we moved here, and yeah, this is the longest I've ever lived somewhere now in my life. So this is home.
How long were you in the military for?
So I was active duty from 94 to 2004.
Okay.
Got out. Went back and did a stint in 2012. They called me again in 2020, 2021. That was an interesting one because when they asked me to come back, they put me in an airborne unit. So I'm getting ready to jump out of planes. I was 45 years old, and they're like, "Hey, sir," I'm filming everything on my phone, right? Watching them put the parachute on, and they're like, "Sir, when was the last time you jumped?" And I was like, "Oh, 1996." And they're like, "Oh, you're gonna be good." I'm like, "Really? Am I?" So, did a stint for about a year, 2020, 2021. And then I ran last cycle, and shortly after the election came to an end, got another call from the Army. And they're like, "Hey, man, sorry you lost the election, but we have another way for you to serve. Do you want to come back in the Army?" So I'm back in now. So I'm still doing reserve stuff with a civil affairs unit down in Rhode Island. So the selling point for me at that point was the Army's understaffed right now. I saw that because when I was in 2020, a lot of guys were getting out for, if they didn't take the COVID vaccine, they were pushing people out, and there was a lot of push towards DEI, and that was driving folks out. In fact, it did it for me because I was in a special forces designated unit, so we had it was down in Homestead, Florida, so Army Special Forces. There were some Navy guys there. And these were tip of the spear type of people. And in a reserve unit, you lay down the training schedule for an entire year. So you know exactly what weekends you're going to be gone and what you're going to be doing. And we had range training weekends twice that year. But what happens is, you show up and, when you're always trying to maintain readiness. So it's is your dental, medical, all these different things that they track. And one of them at that time was your DEI, all the classes that you had to go through.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And so down to the person. And so a company commander's 200 people. Well, in a civil affairs, it's a little bit different. It's a lot smaller. But normal companies are around 200 people. Battalions have 3 to 4 companies. So it can get upward of 1,000 people. And what they're doing is they're looking at every class that you've been through. And if you haven't been to it, you're red. And so I remember the battalion commander, she was even higher, came down and just was kind of ripping everybody for not being compliant with these DEI things. And they said, "You know what? We're next month we're going to get everybody in this conference room and we're going to knock it out. We're going to be green." So they canceled our range weekend. So instead of going and qualifying on our weapons, we sat through classroom training of how we're all inherently racist.
Oh, that sounds productive.
Right? These are the people that are, when the balloon goes up, these are the people that are supposed to go and protect us.
Mm-hmm.
And they took away the ability to train and become proficient on your weapons twice that year. And I thought this isn't for me. I've already served.
You sat through it all then.
Yeah. I sat through it. And ironically, I have a national company. It's run by a black woman. So you're doing this DEI stuff and you're sitting here being, lectured about how you're inherently racist and you have these unconscious biases. And I'm like, do I though? Because I got a black woman at home running my company that I've entrusted with.
Did you say that?
I didn't. No, I didn't have the courage.
No.
Like, you're in these stupid, it's just not worth it, to kind of ruffle feathers with, this kind of military stuff. You just sit through it and
There's no change.
put up with it. Well, there is changing it. Like, we've done it, right? So it's through politics and it's through the right people and
But not in the moment.
not in the moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to play the game and you have to realize when the right time is to make those kind of changes. So for me, that was the Biden administration. Biden appointed the first female Secretary of the Army. It was this woman, Christine Wormuth. And I thought to myself, like, even for that, it was like, well, I'm going to put the first female in. Well, what about her qualifications?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's a lot of, one of my good friends, was a Black Hawk helicopter pilot and is running like one of the largest, defense companies in the world. My ex-wife was, the first female to serve in an Army Ranger battalion. There's really qualified women out there, but this person that they put in, like they kind of touted just her gender as her peak qualification. So I'm glad to see that this administration is finally pivoting away from all that. I think what Hegseth is doing is, the Secretary of Defense is great. It's about, hey, this is the standard. We are going to get away with affinity programs, and we're just going to rally around being Americans.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally down with that, and I think it's really helping morale. I've seen it firsthand. So I had my annual Army training exercise back in June, and I could tell firsthand that the morale in the military is seemingly more positive.
That's good.
Folks are focused on warfighting missions. And every time, like it's not like we're doing these mass layoffs or kicking people out of the military, but if you're not upholding the standard and you're not meeting the standard, they are separating you. And people are like, oh, that's because it's a DEI, but it's not. It's just that we are finally back to focusing on core warfighting skills. We don't care if you're black, white, Irish, Mexican. It doesn't matter. You're an American soldier.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing. We're going to wear the American flag on our patch or patch on our shoulder. And we're going to fight, focus on fighting and winning America's wars. And that's what the military is supposed to be. So it did run some good people out, but now you're seeing the lag of a couple of years worth of folks getting out. Army is finally meeting its recruiting goals, but we're getting a lot of inexperienced people in. So when they called and said, hey, the Army's back, but we could use some folks with some experience to come back and kind of just help train the next generation, for me, I was like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. I'm in.
How do you see the attitudes in the next generation coming in? Is it different than past generations?
So the attitude is still there, like a desire to serve. It's a different military, though. I'll give you an example. Like when I did this jump 4 years ago, all of those like younger, guys, they had their phones and everything, and they're in the airplane and they're taking selfies and like, can we jump with these cameras? I was like, wait, that's allowed? Like we're taking selfies inside a C-130 getting ready to do an airborne operation. So it is a little bit different. But, essentially these are still great Americans that, are serving for the same reasons, and that unites us.
Yeah.
And it also benefits us in a way, too, because warfare is changing, like what you're seeing over in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Let's say, like with the drones.
Yeah.
So more tech savvy. These kids are showing up in.
Does that make you feel a little obsolete?
No. You're still going to need boots on the ground, but it does help to have folks that, understand some of the.
But as an older guy with these younger guys, do they show you how to use your phone here and there? And how do I fly this drone this way or that way?
No, honestly. In fact, it was a source of pride for me when I went back in. I knew I was gonna have to take a PT test.
Yeah.
So I was like, I know these guys are gonna be looking at me as like the old dude. So I got to go out there and kick their butts. Yeah. So I did.
Good.
Yeah. I trained a lot harder probably for it, but I was like, all right, I'm gonna put these young 20-year-olds on notice.
So, as a congressman, what do you think the U.S. role is in world affairs? Do you think that we need to be the policeman of the world, or do you think that we need to kind of tone things back and not really intervene in other countries' affairs?
I don't like the term policeman of the world because I think to me that has like an implication, negative connotation, like we're going to go around meddling in other people's affairs.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's a naive position to take to say like, hey, we're going to go back to like this nationalist flavor where we only care what's going on within our borders. The world is too interconnected, right? So I remember thinking about this a couple years ago. I own a national facility management company. So we do a lot of snow plowing in the winter all around the country.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple years ago, salt prices were through the roof. I'm like, what's going on here? It's like, well, the lithium mines overseas are stealing all of the workers from other like kind of extraction, entities like salt. So because a lot of these batteries and, newer electronics required that lithium, it was attracting people from other mining, fields. And next thing you know, snow plowing services in Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts are more expensive because of that. So the world is so interconnected at this point that it's a naive position to be like, we're going to just go back to focus on ourselves. And if we do that, it creates this vacuum where who do you think is going to show up? China, Russia, these other countries that are trying to unseat the United States is that sole hegemonic power that we've been for the last, 70, 80 years coming out of World War II. Mm. So I certainly don't subscribe to let's get involved in everybody's wars. Like I'm in the military, my kid's in the Navy. In fact, he's home. He's leaving for Korea in just 5 more days. And then I won't see him again until October. So I certainly don't want to see the military just around the world, like getting in everybody's business. But we have to shape those events. And so, another thing that's going on right now, and it started in 2015, and no one's really, really talking about it yet, but it's, and I wish they would more, but China has this thing called the Belt and Road Initiative. Have you ever heard of that?
No.
Right, exactly. And yet it's just about done. It was $1 trillion project, and China has locked up 100-year trade agreements with the number of countries in this world that have that cumulatively combine to account for 50% of the world's GDP and 75% of the world's total population.
So is this their involvement in Africa and South America?
Those trade things.
Okay.
Yep. That's exactly. So that falls under this umbrella of Belt and Road.
Yeah.
So, Xi Jinping's been talking about this. They rolled it out in 2015. It's China's version of the Marshall Plan. Mm-hmm. And so there's all these different things. The first phase was we need to blunt American influence. And
can you explain what the Marshall Plan is?
Yeah, the Marshall Plan was, back, 50, 60 years ago, it was the United States' plan on how we were going to basically spread our, American ideals around the world. We were going to grow our economy, had a lot to do with trade. It was multifaceted. And so China's doing something similar. So blunt American influence. We've got to increase production, and our economy at home. Export our goods, build a stronger military. And they're putting out these stated objectives. They want to, again, these are things that people can actually look up. So this isn't Chris Bright saying, we have to look out for China. If you get on and look, they are saying this is what they want to do. Mm-hmm. They want to sow discourse in the United States.
Yeah.
They want to cripple basically unseat us by crippling our economy, our manufacturing at home. They want to establish new trade agreements with other people. So when you look at Belt and Road and you look at a map, since they started implementing this, it's essentially done. And it cuts out the United States and Canada and Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, and a handful of our strongest allies in Europe. All the rest has signed on with China. So when you saw the tariffs come out early on in the Trump presidency,
mm-hmm. What, the first administration?
The second time around. So just a couple months ago. And if you remember, everyone's like, it's going to collapse the economy.
Yeah.
It's, what is this guy doing? Tariffs don't work. President Trump and his economic advisors know from an economic policy that tariffs aren't long-term solution, right? It drives costs. But really, the second and third levels of that policy is where I think the magic was. And a lot of those countries, the countries that you never even heard of, like I thought China was our guy or Brazil. Like, why are we putting tariffs on countries like Djibouti or Madagascar, like all these like other smaller countries we really don't have these big trade deficits with? Well, the reason was these were countries that had signed on to Belt and Road.
Oh.
And so the Trump administration brilliantly created leverage to get some of these other countries to extract themselves from a treaty that they already got involved in. And that's important because that is pushing back against this Chinese plan. It's why you saw us pushing back against the Panama Canal. Some of these other treaties around the world, they were all tied to Belt and Road, and the Chinese were trying to slowly dismantle our network of trade partners.
I heard pieces of that with the Panama Canal.
Yep.
But why doesn't the news media report on those things?
Yeah, good question, right? Well, I think we know why.
Yeah.
It leans heavily left.
Yeah.
And for one reason or another, I just feel like this isn't something we want to shine a light on. But, after this, I would tell you, to do this. When we're on the campaign trail, I ask people to pull out your phones, go into Amazon right now in the search bar, and put in blue jeans. The first 5 or 6 companies that are coming up are all Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening over there, there's currency manipulation, there's IP infringement, they have cheaper labor, they're stealing stuff. But then what they're doing is they'll pick a Chinese sponsored, company. So they'll say, all right, you're going to be our manufacturing, blue jeans or whatever. They don't have to worry about things like minimum wage or the things that we do over here. They don't even have to worry about profit because they're being subsidized by the CCP. Because the CCP sees this as a weapon to go over and infiltrate our company, our country, our economy, and kind of cripple us from the inside out. So now this Chinese company has these cheaply made goods, and they start flooding and dumping them into Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
What does that do over time? Well, Wrangler, Levi's, all these American-made companies, they can't compete. They can't sell their jeans for $15, $20 a piece. And so slowly over time, that erodes their customer base. They start to scale down their manufacturing. And then over the course of a decade, next thing you know, you look around, we don't have any American-made, textile companies, right? I read something like, 70% of our beef comes from Brazil. Like if we start exporting everything that we need to survive, what happens when, you have another type of COVID situation?
Well, we saw that with COVID.
Yeah. We saw the panic buying. We saw all of that. You saw supply chain issues. Like that should have been a wake-up call to
people. It should have been, and I thought it would have been, but it doesn't seem to have been.
It doesn't.
And the same thing with drugs. A lot of our drugs come from China.
Most of our drugs are manufactured over there.
Yeah. That's insane.
Yep. So, and this is a country that is saying we want to beat the United States. They're saying it.
Yeah.
And they're backing it up with action. When I was at West Point in 94, the U.S. had the 10th largest army in the world. China was the largest. I'm sorry. We had the 3rd. China was 1. And then we had this thing called BRAC, Base Realignment and Closure, and we became the 10th largest army in the world.
What is that?
BRAC is the Base Realignment and Closure. And so it was like, we are going to spend less on the Department of Defense, and so we're going to close bases.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the time where we closed like Pease Air Force Base. We closed places like Fort Devens. If you remember back like mid to late 90s.
No, I don't remember.
Okay.
I was a kid.
All right. Fair enough. But that's what we did. We were downsizing our military. We're like, we don't need this big of a military now. Because Russia's gone. Right. It's not a Cold War anymore. Man, it's the 90s. Things are great, right? Great music. Nobody's attacking us. What happens? 9/11.
Right.
And when we went to war, and I was there, that was a weird time to be in the military because I was pre 9/11, Bosnia and Kosovo. That was our hardest things we were doing. And then 9/11 happens and like instantly we're at war.
Yeah.
And so now when we went into Afghanistan first, we started like doing Tora Bora and hunting bin Laden. And then we kind of also did the war in Iraq, and we quickly made it into Baghdad and toppled Saddam. Well, once we got there and we were done kind of war fighting our way in, and we became like sustainment operations, and we were starting to do some of this nation building, we were exposed. We didn't have the right stuff. And that's where you started to see a bunch of guys get killed from IEDs. Because we were driving around in soft skin Humvees that had not been really innovated on in the last 10 years because budgets had been brought down. We didn't have enough people. So at the time when I came back from Kosovo, 9/11 happened. We didn't have enough people to start defeating IEDs. So I got tapped. They're like, hey, you stand up another engineering company. We need more engineers in the Army to go out and defeat these IEDs. Well, that was a 16-week process. We could put 300 more people through. So every 3 months, we're putting only another 1,000 soldiers out into the field. So it takes time to build up an effective, trained, experienced military. And we saw that, that gap, and we saw that kind of vulnerability caused during that period between the first Gulf War and then 9/11.
So we kind of jumped into it a little too soon, not really being prepared for it?
Not that we jumped in too soon. I mean, world events dictate it, but this is why it's important to invest in the military even when you seemingly don't need it, like projecting strength. So, to start this conversation off, you're asking me, about the military and how I think what the U.S.'s role should be from a policing perspective. We have to have a seat at the table. We have to influence global events either through economics or the military. That's really two ways to do it. Obviously, we don't want to be deploying our military everywhere. And quite frankly, like after, all those years in Iraq and Afghanistan, like, those guys are tired too, right?
Yeah.
Like we've got to rebuild and we've got to retrofit that army. At any given point, the U.S. military strategy was to be able to fight 2 Gulf War size battles simultaneously anywhere around the world. Well, when you're doing Bosnia and Kosovo and Iraq and Afghanistan and peacekeeping missions here and there, like you just spread that capability thin. So we need to be smarter about what that looks like, because you just can't kill your way into good policy, right? Like much like what's happening over in Israel right now in Gaza.
It's very unpopular, I think.
It's very unpopular. Now, we supported Israel, and what happened with, Hamas and everything was barbaric. But, the stance that the Israelis are taking right now and just leveling Gaza, you're creating the next generation of terrorists that are going to hate Israelis for the rest of their life.
Yep.
And so those are the types of things that I think we get involved in maybe a little too quickly. And then the flip side of that is how we got out of Afghanistan. Like I was appalled.
Yeah.
It was one of the catalysts that actually I was like, I'm in now. I got to run. This is ridiculous. I lost 19 West Point classmates in Iraq and Afghanistan. And for Joe Biden to be like,
Really?
well, yep. And our class was only 800 people. So for Biden to say, it's time to get out now. I want on my watch to be able to say that I got us out of Afghanistan, pull out, and we just let everything implode. Like it's reset. The Taliban has completely taken control of Afghanistan again. We left them like $1 trillion of military equipment.
Yeah.
Interpreters, all these people that were supporting us, we left them behind. By all accounts, those people have been killed like a horrendous way to get out. And to me, that is the thing that just drives me crazy the most, is politicians that are making these decisions for political reasons instead of what's right for the country. When
We were told it was a successful withdrawal.
Yeah, and we can see it with our eyes. We saw there was a guy, there was a specialist or a sergeant from Lawrence, Massachusetts. I live down in Derry, so that's like 20 minutes away.
Yeah.
One of our soldiers was killed because it was such an ad hoc withdrawal. They were one of the gates at Bagram Air Force Base that when that flood came in and all those people were there and then the car bomb went off.
What did they think was going to happen?
What did they think was going to happen? Right. Exactly.
That's crazy.
Yep.
If you were looking back at our foreign policy over the last 25 years, since 9/11, what do you think our biggest mistakes and what do you think our biggest successes have been?
That's a great question.
Do you think we should have invaded Iraq?
In the first place? Well, that's a hard one. It really is, because you see things, and what I recognize as my Achilles heel was I'm fed this information only through the media.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, did we think that there was weapons of mass destruction there? I believe that there was. I believe Colin Powell, when he went in front of the UN and presented all of those facts, that, yeah, they were probably there. Was Saddam Hussein an enemy of the United States at that time? Yes, he was. Right? Were we looking at that entire Middle East region and all of our enemies and saying, look, they got us, they knocked down 2 of our towers, we felt very exposed? I think all of the facts were there at the time. And, it's obviously looking back and saying, like, where were those weapons? We never found them. I do believe they were there at some point. Where they went, I don't know. But then we got bogged down there. And the United States is never good at, no country is. You're never good at nation building. So I think I would have been okay with a quick advance into Iraq, seize those weapons, maybe take Saddam Hussein out of power. But even that's dangerous.
Right.
Because when you take somebody out of power, you have to have somebody that goes in.
Mm-hmm.
You create a vacuum.
Look at Syria right now.
Boom.
The guy that's the president
Bashar
of Syria.
al-Assad, yep.
No, that was the
old guy. Yeah.
That was the last guy. They're calling the new guy.
He's worse.
They're already saying that he's the president.
Right.
But, he wasn't elected.
Right.
But he was part of Al-Qaeda. And we're recognizing him as the legitimate leader of Syria right now, which is kind of an awful thing.
Right.
Al-Qaeda was responsible for 9/11, and here we are saying, well, and even in Afghanistan, aren't we subsidizing the Taliban right now to something about like $100 million a month or something crazy?
I saw that. I haven't done my own research on that to know if that's actually a real number, but we're not necessarily subsidizing them, but we are. I think they recognize that they are the controlling government. We still want to try to have some type of geopolitical and influence that in some way, but we've given up all of our leverage. That's for sure.
Should we have? Because Osama bin Laden was found in Pakistan,
right?
But there doesn't seem to be any retribution as far as Pakistan goes. Is it because they're a nuclear power? Like, why didn't we do anything to Pakistan? Because they obviously are harboring them for years.
Right. So yes, they're a nuclear power. That kind of changes the calculus a little bit. He started in Afghanistan. He was in Tora Bora. We missed him by hours.
Were you over there then?
I wasn't. No, but obviously I have friends and you hear stuff, and I've done a lot of research on that. And we missed him by hours. One of my best friends was leading those cave clearing missions in the early days. He's got a Bronze Star with a V Device for Valor for some of his operations in there. We let him get away through indecisiveness there too. We had him.
Politics.
Yeah. It's like, well, what happens if this? What happens if that? And so wait. He slips out the back door. And then like another 2 years went up. And I think that's when we also had there were other attacks. Don't quote me on this, but I believe there was another attack or two on an embassy in between 9/11 and when we caught bin Laden. So, but yeah, he moves over into Pakistan. We didn't slap them on the wrist, but we also went in and got them without their approval and permission. So,
well, we're America, so we don't need your approval.
Listen, it's like, yeah, man, like what you're keeping this guy. He killed 2,500 Americans, and we're coming to get him. We don't care what you think.
Yeah.
What
kind of Republican would you call yourself if you were you a traditional Republican? Are you a libertarian Republican? Where would you put yourself on that chart?
I'll start by saying I hate labels. Like not even before I got into politics, right? Because you've got, first of all, Republicans and Democrats. Like I'm running right now, the back of our shirts from last cycle said principle over politics. Like I really believe that. I am absolutely a Republican with respect to the principles that I have. But I think that a lot of these issues that we have in this country are so complex that just to divide everybody and say, like, we're going to divide people into just two viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, I think there's just, it's not enough to be able to say this encapsulates everything that you believe. So
what
to
is
that end.
What drives your political philosophy?
Right. So I'm a strong free markets guy.
Okay.
So heavy on the economy and a lot of those Republican principles, limited government. I think that the federal government or government of any at any level, honestly, is not the best entity to solve problems. Government's good for national defense, public infrastructure, kind of leveling playing fields. But give me one other example where a government-run entity is the most efficient solution or is able to compete. Like even the post office, right, provides a vital service, but they got disrupted by UPS and FedEx, right? So I believe that limited government is best. I want less government. And then, of course, that what comes with that is less taxes. I believe in a strong national defense, that if you project strength and if you, strength through deterrence, I believe that works, right? So things like, protecting children is a big one for me right now, too. And under that umbrella, it's the men and women's sports, social media, a lot of the damage that's causing to our kids. So these are my kind of fundamental principles. Where that puts me, though, on the spectrum is even though I have a lot of, strong Republican principles, I do think we need to do a better job of bringing down, the political rhetoric. I think we need to do a better job of having political discourse here in this country. So I would love to engage with Democrats and actually start to have some debates about this stuff instead of the name calling.
Have you been campaigning around a lot of Democrat areas?
Well, Portsmouth is obviously a pretty Democratic area. We're spending time there.
How's the reception been?
With the Republicans, it's great. Democrats are not there. Like, they don't want to engage in this stuff.
So
right?
They won't even talk to you?
No, they don't even talk to you.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's okay, right? We go out, we keep running the game, we keep talking about the issues. And look, I'm open to conversations about anything. And I think when you even look at the budget process and how we, what we just went through at the state level, there was a lot of concessions. So on some of these complex issues, the best type of negotiations, I think, are like when everybody has to give up a little bit. Like we're advancing the ball forward, we're having good political discourse. We could talk about the issues in fact without having to call names. If I look at this country, that's one of the things that concerns me the most. We could fix our economy, right? We can close our borders. But if we get to a spot where we are fighting with each other and we become so, disunified, that creates like a security vulnerability, right? I remember 9/11, how patriotic and united everybody was.
Yeah.
So one good thing that came out of that 9/11.
It was a whole different time than now.
Right? Doesn't it feel like that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's where we need to get back to, where you're just proud to be an American. It's like, let's figure this out together. United we stand. I'd love to get back to that. And even if we have different, political viewpoints, it's much like you're at a concert, Fenway Park. You know that half of the people around you have a different political viewpoint. But we can't all come together on certain things, right? So I would love to see us just come back around, like, let's rebuild America and let's start with some of the things that we can both agree on. Try to find some opportunities to work together and to talk about these different things and to get away from the name calling and to say, all right, listen, this is how we're approaching it. These are the facts that we're bringing to the table. Let me hear your perspective. The only thing I'm seeing, though, on the Democratic side is a lot of stuff is emotional based.
Yeah.
It's not actually fact based. It's not. And so they'll tout out the sad story or this or that, and they put that out there, and their opposition to our platform is to brand us as misogynists or anti-LGBTQ or anti-immigration. We're not. It's just that from a practicality standpoint, we don't see how a 3 times the amount of normal immigration is sustainable here in this country. And next thing you know, it's like, well, you're racist then for saying that. I'm not racist.
Yeah. I
just don't know where you put 11 million illegal immigrants when it's proven and it's documented by, nonpartisan economists that 4.4 million people is the normal amount of immigration levels each year. Like, where do you put these people? It's a tax on our system. Doesn't mean that I don't empathize with the plight of these refugees that are fleeing some pretty tough places. It's just like we have to be.
It doesn't help the homeland when we are extending our welfare state to the point where it can't even support the people that are here.
That's right. Yeah. You made a comment on one of your shows last week, 2 weeks ago. You guys were talking about homelessness in Manchester.
Yeah.
And the drug problem. That's federal policy that contributed to that.
Yeah.
So when they created these sanctuary cities and they took this federal grant money, they started busing these, migrants to Manchester. And it was 6 months or a year's worth of support. Well, what happens on that 13th month? What happens on the 6th month and 1 day? You have people here now that
You
can't
have to take
legally
care of
work.
them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, and then when that money just runs out, now you have these people that they're stuck here. I actually look at that as cruel.
Mm-hmm.
You're luring people here with this false sense of support
To buy votes.
or, because emotionally you want to help them short term, but then they're here now.
Yeah.
But you don't want to you're not going to keep paying for them, God forbid, right? So some of these like liberal mentalities, just like when, was it Texas, Florida, sent a bunch of
Florida to Martha's Vineyard?
Yeah.
Is that what you're thinking about?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
These are people that were like, oh, we want some. And so
how
they
fast
came,
did they get them off that island?
Exactly. Right. They provided them food and water that day. And we saw them in the church. They got all their media pictures of them helping these people.
And they sent them to poor communities.
And then they shipped them out.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and these are the same people that, well, you're racist for not taking them. Well, you didn't want them in the first place.
Yeah.
You virtue signal with all of your money.
Yeah.
And we're the ones that are saying this isn't a sustainable solution. Let's do it the right way.
Yeah.
And I give this example. It's Thanksgiving, right? You're at your house, big power outage, you got a generator. Your first neighbor shows up. He's like, hey, we're out of power. You're like, yeah, of course, come in, have dinner with us. Second, third, fourth neighbor shows up. You're like, oh, I don't know if I'm having enough food.
Yeah.
When your 50th neighbor shows up, you eventually have to close your doors because your house doesn't fit all these people.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean you're not empathetic. Doesn't mean you're not a good neighbor. Doesn't mean you're against any of that stuff. It means you physically can't help any more people. And I feel like that's where we started to get with some of these communities.
So how long do you let those neighbors stay for, though?
Oh, yeah. You get them through the holiday and you're like, all right, guys, time to go, right?
So that's a good question is where do you stand on deportation? Do you think we should deport all illegals, some illegals?
This is where I wear my business hat, right? And there's all these illegals here, and we've had people that have been here for 10, 15 years. I don't see the ROI in spending all this money to go and round them up and ship them out. If they get arrested, if they're breaking the law, if we come in contact with them, it's like you're on an ICE list, great. I personally don't think it's worth the money or the negative, like the look of what it does to the Republican Party to be actively going into some of these communities and ripping these people out.
But if they're criminals?
If they're criminals, different story.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you've been here for 10 years, 15 years, you're working, you're holding a job down, and you just happen to be here illegally, like that's kind of that gray period. And I think that's a good opportunity for us to negotiate.
If they're working, though, wouldn't they need a Social Security card, Social Security number?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, they can get some, it's
work
not the
visa?
green card. Yeah, thank you. And, yeah, but other guys they're working under the table. They're doing, in the food business, or maybe they're a construction laborer, something like that. I know you're in the trades, like, I am too. You'll see guys at Home Depot, pull up and grab 3 or 4 day laborers in the back and throw them in. They're under the table.
Yeah.
Right? The system is broken.
Yeah.
But maybe that's a compromise because we do recognize that a lot of these people are plugging some holes in our economy where we don't have, the right labor numbers. But, I'm so far I've been in favor of everything that the Trump administration is doing with respect to ICE, but we just have to be careful. I think, it would be incredibly expensive to go and find 40, 50 million people over the next couple of years. Think about the manpower required to do that.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy with sealing the border like we've done. What I want voters here in this district to do, though, is not necessarily to be lulled into a false sense of security with our border. It's been closed by executive order. So we need to codify a lot of the stuff that the Trump administration has done into law.
So what kind of legislation would you support?
A lot of different stuff, So chain immigration is something that I'm opposed to. So you have somebody comes here, they're on a green card or whatever. Or did you know right now you could have an illegal immigrant that crosses the border, pregnant, delivers, a child, and now they're an American citizen.
Or they call that an anchor baby.
Right. And then
Yeah.
and then you have that chain immigration that follows that. Well, we need to change that law. If your mom was here illegally when you were born, and you were young, send them back, right? And so that's something. Or if you were born here and you've been living here the last 10 years, it doesn't I would like to see that not be an automatic citizenship because you came here initially illegally.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, a child that was born to, let's say, a family that was here for work on a work visa or maybe some type of diplomatic, and the child was great. You were allowed to be here when that child was born. I'm okay with that. With respect to other things that we could do, and this was stuff we talked about when the border was actually open, but giving Customs and Border Patrol the ability to kind of adjudicate some of these claims right there, like an expeditious process to look at somebody's application and say, are you really a refugee? What does that look like? And in some of these egregious situations, send them back. So there's certainly things that we can do.
Mm-hmm.
We just have to codify those into law to make sure that the effects that we're feeling now of a closed border can actually be long-lasting.
There's a lot of reports about NGOs that are behind the surges that we've seen. Should anything be done about that?
Which ones in particular?
I know that a lot of the Catholic churches actually get a lot of NGOs that have been pretty much trafficking children over the border. And that's been reported quite a bit over the last couple of years. The reports of signs and NGOs supplying these caravans of people that are coming over the border, they're organizing these. So it almost looks like an invasion when they have 10, 20, 30,000 people coming at once.
The problem is if it is the Catholic Church, but it's
not just the Catholic Church. There have been other companies because
sure. U.S. though, or they're foreign companies, from what I understand. Like some of these missions are down in like Guatemala, like they're Catholic missions.
Yeah, they're
so that's tough because now it's an international. You can't necessarily slap sanctions on the Catholic Church, and if it's down there. So tough problems to solve. But I was actually. It was a mission involved in some of that illegal immigration, but I should probably hold off on sharing a little bit about that because I don't know exactly what the classification is still. But there were things that we were doing downstream to try to impact and disrupt that chain of migrants to kind of shut down some of these underground railways, so to speak, coming through Ecuador, Guatemala, all those kind of southern countries. What I think you can do with that. And what was the stat? It was from last cycle. I want to say it was somewhere to the tune of around $680 to $700 million a year of foreign aid that we were giving to these countries downstream before Mexico. And I think that we could tie some of the foreign aid that we're giving to these countries to their willingness to stop them.
Is this the USAID funding that's been found through Doge?
No, and let's come back and talk about USAID because I feel like that's really gotten misinterpreted on the Republican Party as well.
Okay.
But no, this is just State Department. So we're going to give money to Guatemala, or we're going to give money, like I said, Ecuador, Mexico, Chile, and so I would say, hey, we're giving you $150 million this year. Why are you not doing more to prevent these people from crossing? Like when they show up at your borders and they say, oh, we're going to the United States, right now they're just like, oh, okay, just don't stop here, you're good.
Yeah.
And they're traversing through, or they're taking – I just have to feel like these other countries need to play more of a role so they're not all making it to Eagle Pass, Texas, sneaking across the Rio Grande or, constraining our resources while these other countries are like, oh, no, they're just passing through. So I think there's an opportunity there. Let's talk about USAID, though.
Okay.
Really took some heat. Obviously, we've dismantled like a large part of that. Here's some place that I probably break with Republicans and the Trump administration on.
Okay.
I didn't think we should have dismantled USAID the way we did. Now, I understand why. Why did we do it that way? Well, it's a big, huge organization that accounted for a lot of money. And when Doge came in, if you remember, early on, you saw a lot of like the liberal media was like, look at all these 20 and 30-year-old kids that Elon Musk is bringing in that have access to all of our information.
Mm.
Elon Musk doesn't care about your social security number. He doesn't need it. He doesn't need to clone it and make, a couple $1,000s off of. What they were doing was these were kids that all had the ability to write these different algorithms to comb massive amounts of data and find anomalies where we can then say this looks like fraud. So as they got into it, there were things in there like, here's $26 million to start a DEI project in Syria. That was a real thing. Okay, in Syria, if you are in the LGBT community, you're getting hung. Like they don't have the same viewpoints towards that community that we do and the same level of tolerance. So to me, that's a massive amount of fraud. And why are we spending? Like, what's the ROI on that type of spend over there? And that pisses people off, me included. So once that starts to show up, the optics of it is like USAID is infested. Sorry. It's infested with this type of egregious spending, and there's no oversight on it, and it's being used as a slush fund, by the liberals to push out, an agenda. Got it. For that reason, I understood why they said, let's shut it down. But USAID is a critical function from my perspective. So as I mentioned, I'm a civil affairs officer in the Army. We go into denied and hostile territory overseas to do a lot of the geopolitical, diplomatic work of the military in some pretty tough areas of the world. When I would roll into Kosovo or Bosnia, or when guys would roll into Iraq, Afghanistan, and you're trying to work with local tribal leaders, what can we do to help you? How do we curb some of these fighters that are out there, or these jihadists that are trying to hurt us? Can you give us a heads up, or can you tell us where a weapons cache might be, or what's the pulse on, are these people anti-American? Are they pro-American? We really have to quickly get up to speed and figure out what the pulse is of these communities that we're working in. So if I could go in and say, all right, your power plant is down, or you guys don't have water here, or this school is broken, let us help you. And so we use USAID for that.
So you've seen this firsthand. You've used it firsthand.
I could show you pictures on my phone of rebuilding and doing these civic infrastructure projects downrange using USAID money that absolutely helped us win the hearts and minds. And so by taking away that function from the CIA, from the special forces, from the guys that are leveraging these things in country to actually get our mission done, it hurts. Yep. And it's not something that anybody really knows about because you don't talk about it. Right. And a lot of this stuff, just the way things are done, there's no media coverage. So from the Republicans, we're like, all right, USAID is bad because we're looking at the budget. We're looking at what they're spending money on. Shut them down. But nobody really understands what they're actually doing. And so I do hope that we come back and look at some. And if USAID can function the way it was designed to function, it'll be a real asset. The problem is, the leadership let it go off and have all these different pet projects. It riled a bunch of people up and they shut it down. So that's what happens when, there's not good oversight of some of these agencies. So hopefully that's one that comes back.
The federal government seems to love to waste our money. And so what is your view? What do you think the most existential crisis is for America right now?
China. Without question. Yeah.
Militarily and financial, economically.
Check. Yeah. Chinese, which one? You want to talk about military or you want to talk about economic first?
You go whichever direction
Let's
you want.
Let's go military.
All right, let's do it.
So
they're building islands.
South China Sea, right? And that, do you know why they say they're building that island?
Why?
For ocean research, environmental research.
Where they look like giant landing strips, right?
And they paved it over one of the largest coral reefs in the area. So very.
Won't that hurt the environment?
Yeah, exactly. That's the whole point. It's like, really, you're building this for environmental research, and so that out there, that's a landing strip that's going to control the South China Sea, which impacts a lot of global trade, and certainly like 75, 80, 90% of all that Eurasian, Indo-Pacific, Like, that's a huge thing. They want to, they're talking about invading Taiwan in the next couple of years. Why is Taiwan important? Taiwan controls 75% of all the semiconductors that we use here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Semiconductors, chips, everything that's in our phones, our computers, our cars, our watches, our country runs on this. That could fall in the Chinese hands.
More of the reason to produce them at home.
That's right. Yep, exactly. We have to make those types of investments, right? So Texas is a state that we're looking at, but we have to start bringing some of that here and hedging our risk that these Chinese pose. But let's go back to military. So the 4 biggest nuclear weapons in the world: China, Russia, the United States, China, right? So Chinese and Russians have 3 out of the 4 biggest nuclear weapons. There's a hypersonic missile gap between the United States and China. So, and if China and Russia were to decide together that they were going to take out the United States, they fired all their missiles at us, we have 7 minutes of defense. Like, that's scary. People don't realize that, this lack of investment, where we're spending our money on other things. Again, it's not being a war hawk, but it is recognizing that these other countries around the world are not happy that the United States is sitting on top. And they're have a long strategy to unseat us. So that's one. The Chinese have about 400 more Navy ships than we do, and they're building faster.
Are they smaller, though? They're smaller
They're
boats?
smaller, but, I mean, at some point, who cares if I have a 550-foot ship and you have a 500-foot ship? I mean, I just think, again, false sense of security. It's like, oh, they have smaller ships. Got it. But if they have twice as many, to me, I'd rather have 2 ships that are 80% the size of 1 ship, right? So something we need to be concerned about. And it also shows patterns. It shows patterns of what they're trying to do, where they're investing their money. They have more submarines. They have a submarine gap. They have more ice-breaking ships. Actually, them and the Russians exceed us in ice-breaking. Why is that important? The North and South Poles are mineral rich, and control of those regions where there's untapped resources also gives somebody an edge to a lot of these, kind of rare earth materials, oil, all these different things that exist that they will have, access to and we don't. So we're getting outpaced on a lot of different critical areas. The Chinese, as I mentioned early on, back when I started in the military in 94, largest army in the world, but no force projection capabilities. So we have to worry about them coming here. We have to worry about them going to Europe. That's changed now too. The Chinese are able to move their military around the world and exert their will. So we have to be paying attention to that, and we have to be doing things to be able to offset that. From an economic perspective, we've got the Belt and Road, currency manipulation. They are stealing intellectual property left and right. Company will go into China, and the CCP will say, all right, if you want to sell here, we need to have back end to your code or your user interface. And they hold these companies hostage. And companies are like, we know as soon as we open up the back end to the software, they're going to steal it. Chinese are like, no, we're not. But it's such a huge market that these people are doing it. And then lo and behold, their technology gets stolen.
Mm-hmm.
So China is somebody that I think, existential threat, not there yet. So, but I think they are the biggest potential existential threat that we have.
We still outspend them by an insane amount of money too, militarily.
We do, yeah.
So do you think that the money that we're spending right now, we should be diverting it from certain technologies or certain investments into other aspects that will kind of limit their potential?
No, I don't. Money that we spent, and a lot of things, we throw around a term in the Republican Party, military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
Military-industrial complex. I worked in, aerospace and defense for a little bit. I can absolutely 100% tell your listeners that there is no C-level executive sitting at any major U.S. company saying we need more wars so we can smart. It's just not happening. That never enters into the calculation. There's always enough places to sell your stuff. We don't need these wars. So they are not influencing any type of government action around the world. But that military spend, one, you just can't ramp it up. So if it is a period of 10 years where there's no wars going on. We should actually just feel grateful,
Yeah.
but we should not take our eye off the ball.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a matter of time. And unfortunately, the world is always going to be like that. It's always going to be dangerous. There's always going to be people out there that are trying to knock us off. But on top of that, like GPS, all these cell phones, all these different cellular kind of communications, these are all came out of R&D around the military. So there are really good, kind of tangential effects to military spending.
What is your views on monetary policy?
With respect to what? It's such a huge topic.
Hmm?
It's such a huge topic with respect to like what in particular?
Well, the debt for one. We're $37 trillion in debt, and a fifth of our debt is paid yearly to the Federal Reserve for interest on the debt.
Right.
When we're outspending military spending, right? We're spending more on that interest than we are on the military. So what do you think as far as what do we do to lower our debt, to get rid of the deficit, lower our debt? What do we do?
Depends on what your feeling is on carrying debt to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
I used to be, growing up in like the 80s and 90s, I told you, I grew up in Jersey. We go into the city, there was this big debt counter in Times Square.
Yeah.
And it was just numbers real fast and just adding up the U.S. debt. I think, oh my God, that's so bad.
Yeah.
We're eventually going to go bankrupt. And when I got out of the military, I went to business school at MIT. I studied under some really smart people.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Welch was one of them. Founder of and CEO, not the founder, but he was a longtime CEO of GE. I did an internship under Warren Buffett, actually out in Omaha.
Nice.
And then there was this guy, Lester Thurow,
Mm-hmm.
who was a world-class economist. And this was eye-opening for me. Lester Thurow was nonchalant about the country's debt. He was like, why do we have to worry about the debt? The debt is in our own currency. We could just print more money. I was like, that doesn't seem right. If we print more money, that's just going to lead towards inflation, blah, blah, blah. But it's a fascinating concept because debt in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. If I take debt and I say, hey, can you loan me $1,000? You give me $1,000. If I take that $1,000 and I buy a work truck, and with that work truck, what type of contractor are you?
Oh, I work in construction.
Okay, what kind of trade's that like?
Insulation.
Insulation. Perfect. I'm going to say, hey, $1,000, buy a truck, and then maybe your first couple rolls of insulation.
Mm.
And you didn't have that money yet because you're starting out your business.
Mm.
Within that month, you take your truck and you go and do a job, and you take that insulation you bought and the truck you have, you go and do a job for $1,500. That $1,000 of debt generated $500. Then if you continue to make smart investments and build, it's going to generate more and more money.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy Thoreau and this, I do subscribe to this now. If you're using debt smartly to drive your economy forward, then don't worry about what the debt number is. Right?
I think the problem is, though, is that we have so many people in government that don't do it smartly, and now we're $37 trillion
That's
in
the
debt.
rub. So if you take that $1,000 instead of buying the truck and the insulation, and you give it to a Syrian refugee,
Yeah.
and you say, we're going to use this $1,000, and I could house 20 families with this, and I could afford to pay them for a month of food. That does nothing to help. That is very bad debt because there's no ROI on that. It doesn't help our economy, and those are the types. So it's the difference between smart spending and kind of emotional-based spending and a lot of spending on social services.
Do you think that fractional reserve currencies, do you think that is smart spending, or do you think that's good debt, bad debt?
Remains to be seen, right? I don't think about it necessarily from that, but I think about the type. So where I think, here's a perfect example. The One Big Beautiful Bill.
Yeah.
Right? You're seeing on our side, we're like, hey, we're spending more on defense. We're spending more on infrastructure. And the Democrats are saying, look at this. He's spending more than anybody else has.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to spend money on infrastructure. right? Roads help our commerce. It helps all of us. I think that's a good spot for the federal government to get involved. I've talked ad nauseum about why I think it's important to spend, money on defense. Those types of spending, I think, are good types of things.
So that big beautiful bill added 1.8, 1.9 trillion,
Something like that, yeah,
to the deficit.
right.
We're just going to tack onto the debt.
It's going to tack onto the debt, but it was also, to me, that was type of investment in infrastructure that is going to propel, the country forward. I think there was some things in there for energy. So all of these things that are going to jumpstart the economy, I think that's going to generate more in revenue over the next couple of years that offset. So to me, that is a good use of debt.
But is it government revenue, though?
It's government revenue. It also just helps the overall economy.
So at what point does that money get paid back and the actual debt go down?
So how does the debt get paid down? That's a good question. It's incumbent on the government when we come up with these things like DOGE, right? And I railed against why I was not overly excited about the dismantling of USAID. Let's not confuse the fact that I am almost giddy over what they're doing with DOGE, because this is an opportunity, I think, to really be much more efficient in our spending and use money like that to start paying down some of these things. But right now, we still have an A credit rating. That's good stuff. Who owns the debt, though, is important.
Mm-hmm.
We have to pay attention to that. So
China owns a lot of that.
Yes, that's what I was just going to say. And with Belt and Road that we talked about earlier, they're creating these debt traps for these companies, for these other countries that are getting in, and they're going to be subservient to China because they are going to run these high deficits and be basically at China's beck and call. So it's an overly complicated question. We almost would have to do an entire topic. And admittedly, I'm not like a PhD level economist to go and talk about all these different level effects. There's pros and cons to the economic policy that we're taking right now, but overall, in the long run, I am okay with leveraging debt for longer term investments in this country. While I'd love to see a balanced budget eventually. We're seemingly doing it at the state. Can we ever do it at the federal government? Who knows?
So would you vote for a
balanced budget?
No, would you vote for a budget that isn't balanced?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because again, it's like our principles. I would love to say no, I'm going to hold firm, but it's just, again, there's so many different complex, just the way the government works and the way we pass bills, things get bolted on and this and that. So I'd be lying to you if I said I can't ever see myself, holding the line for a balanced budget, because it's just impractical. We're going to have to make some concessions, but
we need to make huge sacrifices on the federal government level.
We do.
And I think that if we get to the point, the only thing that's keeping us a world power right now is our military.
Yep.
What's our dollar tied to? The Federal Reserve, right?
Yeah. I read a great book about a month ago on kind of fiscal and economic warfare. I was really interested in what the economic, like these embargoes that we've taken against Russia when they invaded Ukraine 3 years, like, is it really working? So I kind of started to do some research on that. And I do think that those work up to a certain point, but eventually it actually starts to have negative implications for our own economy. So, but we've gotten ourselves into a hole on a lot of different things.
So I remember when George Bush took office, I was like 13, 14, right? National debt.
Old.
Yeah. National debt was $4.5 trillion.
Yeah.
We're at $37 trillion now. He doubled the debt. Obama doubled the debt. I did like Trump's first term where he didn't double the debt until COVID. And that was because of that big bill that they spent, I think, $8 trillion on.
Right.
And now people's groceries are twice as much as they used to be.
Right.
Houses are twice as much as they used to be.
Yep.
Cars are twice as much as they used to be. And a lot of people that are middle class, they say that 60% or 70% of Americans don't have more than $1,000 in their bank account. They
Yeah.
don't have enough
I thought it was
savings.
even higher than that. Yeah.
They don't have enough savings if there's an emergency. If their car breaks down, then they can't get to work.
That's right.
So these are the issues that everyday Americans are facing, and they're
Right.
watching government spend carelessly. But if they spent the same way, they would lose their house, they would lose their
Oh,
car,
right.
they wouldn't be able to feed their kids. They can't even afford health care.
Right.
The Affordable Care Act, which was supposed to make things affordable.
Isn't that ironically named bill? Most
now,
ironic bill
now
ever.
more people than ever are going on Medicaid, and they're touting that as a success.
Right.
But
And then go ahead.
If you have people that are reliant on the government, they're not independent, and we're becoming a very dependent society on our government. And there's so much spending going on that I think it's irresponsible for the government to not balance the budget to begin with, and that's what people are looking for when they're voting these days.
Mhm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that summary. When these people, I read that stat and heard that. I actually thought it was like around 80%. 60 is actually would be somewhat optimistic that these people are carrying massive amounts of credit card debt. And
It's
paying
around 25% of people that have under $1,000, and it's about 25%, I believe, 25 to 30% of people that do. So it's around 60%.
Crazy.
But then it doesn't get much better after that. Like they talk about, I think the top 2%, 1% or whatever, controlling 60% of the wealth.
Right.
And that is an issue. And a lot of it has to do with inflation.
Yeah.
And a lot of
that's
inflation
where I
has
was
to
gonna
do
go.
with printing money.
Yep.
So I think that it's time for the federal government to really tighten its belt, just like everyday Americans do.
Yeah.
And I think that we want leaders in office that are willing to make the government do that. And I understand what you're saying about national security. We can't let China surpass us and push
Right,
us
right.
around. But we also have to be smart.
That's right.
And we outspend every other country by 10 times. We have military bases all around the world. And I think that concerns a lot of people.
Hmm.
We have 1,000 military bases all over the world. Do we need every one of them?
I would encourage you to actually look into when you think about, when we start conceding pockets of land, like who fills that? So we close an air base in Turkmenistan or something like that.
Mhm.
Who's going to fill that? Right? Like, the Russians, the Chinese, like that's the thing is,
But what is our purpose there?
what is our purpose there is to maintain that regional stability. Right. And maybe you don't see a war or anything happening right there right now, but it's intelligence gathering, or it's the ability to defend, an ally in that region, whatever that looks like. It might be an air reserve base that if war were to break out with China, this is a spot where we can fly our fuel in or parts just to, you have to think about the logistics. Like whenever a war breaks out, how do you bring food, gas, medical supplies, repair parts to wherever you're engaging.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that reason, a lot of these bases and stuff that we're maintaining, but I would argue that's not really even what's driving, a lot of when you turn around and give, I don't know, $8 trillion or $8 billion, whatever that number was, in free money, Paycheck Protection Program, we just put out a huge pot of money for people that was abused. Everybody in the country gets $600 during COVID. Like a lot of these things that we did, we flooded our local economy with cash.
Yeah.
At the same time that the entire world was shutting down with all of its like supply chains, and we just drove the prices up on everything. People were home, they had money, and they were not producing goods. Like it was the perfect, storm to be able to create this inflationary mess that we're in. Number one way to bring inflation down is to raise interest rates, which is why we're seeing interest rates being, higher, like what they are now. But now has an impact on people's home values. So, here in New Hampshire, housing is at a very big premium. It's tough to get. People are overpaying for them, but you can't get that wealth out now if you're at like a 3% interest, or like even if you're refinancing or thinking about moving, you're going to go from a 3 to an 8%, right? So it's funny because it cripples people, but it's other areas that high interest rate and making it more expensive to borrow money is taking money out of the supply, which is bringing that stuff down eventually. So longer term economic policy, these higher interest rates are actually helping people, but we have to survive it for the next couple of years. And that sucks, right? And so to your point, if you only have $1,000 and all your debt is on credit cards,
Yeah.
and those credit cards are variable rates, then short-term spending and fiscal policy is killing you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you overlay on that energy policy. So Biden came in 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, cancels the Keystone Pipeline, cancels all these different permits. Guess what? Now fuel goes through the roof. Russia invades Ukraine. So fuel costs, longer-term economic policy that in the short term are impacting people. We've been killing people for years with the decisions that federal government has been making.
Mm-hmm. I think we're going to continue to do that more if we keep printing more money.
Could be again. But again, that's like when we're printing money and we're spending it, what are we spending it on? If we're investing money right now to be able to start to help Americans build businesses, redo our roads, like a rail network, whatever that looks like, as long as it's going to contribute to the economy, I can live with that. I can't live with spending to just give it away overseas or for a lot of these different social programs that are literally going to generate no ROI.
Did you see that stat on the median age of home buyers today compared
No,
to?
definitely not today.
I believe it was for 30-year-olds, and I think it went back 40 years, 30 to 40 years. So 30 or 40 years ago, the median age was for 30-year-olds was 51 or 52% of home buyers.
Okay.
Today it's 11.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we hear about a population decrease, a lot of that has to do with it. I think people can't afford to have kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I have heard that millennials are having less than average children.
You have to work 30% more than for the same standard of living than a boomer did. And a lot of that has to do with spending.
Yeah.
Because the government wastes too much money. There's not enough guardrails, I don't think.
I totally agree with that.
So what kind of guardrails can be put up to stop this? Because if we're going to keep reinvesting, how do we do it responsibly? How do we keep people from wasting our money?
Mm-hmm. I think debt ceiling is a good one, right? Like when we keep voting to like raise the debt ceiling so we could pass more discretionary spending. This would never fly, by the way, too. But another thing I always thought was, like the congressional race. It's a 2-year term. Mm-hmm. You're constantly running. You're constantly having to raise money to go out there. It would be great if a congressional term was like, let's say 4 years. Now, again, this would never happen. So this is kind of pie in the sky stuff. But if we start aligning what we're looking for with the process, you're going to get better results. So when you have politicians that are out there having to raise money and make promises, and you're only going to be in office for a couple years, and you're just trying to get reelected.
That's got to suck.
Yeah, it does suck, but it's like spend. Oh, you need this? Yeah, like let's raise money and we can spend money on that. So the incentives for politicians to cut spending and bring that back home, it's like, well, if it's going to cost a little bit more, but at least I'm bringing it home to Florida or to my, unfortunately, over the last 8 years, we haven't brought anything back to New Hampshire.
It's still spending.
Pat Pappas is just he's just been a vote for the Democratic Party and hasn't brought anything back to our state. But yeah, I mean, I'm with you on that. I'm with you. We need to be very fiscally responsible. I do think I've talked about how good use of debt. I am still aligned with you that we need to bring this down.
I started my company with a credit card and a business loan.
Yeah.
And I paid them off.
Right.
And sometimes it wasn't easy.
I know. Yeah.
I mean, you're a business owner.
Yep.
So
I bootstrapped my company as well.
There's nothing wrong with borrowing money, but you have to pay it back.
Right.
And when's the last time we've had a surplus?
Right.
In the 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
I was 10.
Yeah.
And when's the last time we've been out of debt? Andrew Jackson. So that's going back hundreds of years.
No kidding.
It's time to turn it around, I think.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, social services are a huge part of it. It's bigger than the military. And I think that having open borders is driving that up. What do you think that we need for election reform laws in this country?
I don't think it's too much to ask that you are who you say you are.
All right.
Right? Like, I feel like when I get asked this question, it's like, I almost feel like I have to come up with this like brilliant answer to solve election integrity. It's not. It's like, it's blocking and tackling stuff.
Well,
Be who you are and vote once.
So we were talking about deportation earlier. So people that have been here for 20 years or 10 years or 5 years, they don't have a criminal record, so those people will be allowed to vote?
Are they American citizens?
No.
There's your answer.
What about healthcare? What do you got for ideas with healthcare?
Oh, you want me to just solve healthcare
Yeah.
right now?
Yeah.
All right, hold my beer.
All
No, another one, right?
What's been wrong, do you think?
Oh, gosh, so many different things. The payer system, pharmacies, I think insurance gets in there and muddles stuff up. When I used to run the government division for Philips Healthcare, $880 million business, and we sold through Medicaid, Medicare, VA, Bureau of Indian Affairs, and the Department of Defense Health. The federal government, their budget runs October 1st to September 30th. So around mid-August, like, it would almost be called the Festival of the Spare Parts. And so all these government healthcare agencies wanted to protect their budget, make sure that they got the same amount back. They'd start buying a lot of consumables and just stick them in shipping containers and storage containers, right? Because if they had a $8 million budget and they were sitting at $7 million, if they didn't spend that, then next year they would be at $7 million. So they're spending money on stuff they didn't need just to protect their budget.
That happens in a lot of parts of government.
So add that up across all the different areas of government, the massive amounts of fraud. And so I think at the federal government, I would love to see some type of an initiative where we incentivize procurement officers. KOs are called, contracting officers. And the reason I call them KO is because in the military, a CO is a commanding officer. So these KOs, I don't really see them being incentivized right now on driving efficiency. It's like, here's your budget, procure your service to that line item. And, oh, by the way, if you can get it cheaper, this or that, or if you can buy with efficiency or whatever that looks like, it's not done that way.
Mm-hmm. So
I think with the healthcare system, just relooking the federal procurement system as a whole, I think that gets you there. Drug prices, you mentioned it earlier. A lot of stuff's being made over in China.
Yeah.
It's not going to be cheaper bringing it here into the U.S. in the short run, but I think that mitigates risk. And I think over time we could work to bring costs down.
Do you think the FDA does a good job?
I think they're essential. I think companies could cut corners and rush things out to market. So admittedly, I am not in that regulatory environment. I've got a lot of friends from MIT that are in like that biotech space.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that they lament against the FDA, but part of me is like, is that, are your gripes with them because you're trying to push something a little bit faster to market than it should be? I don't know. I would bet my house, though, that there's inefficiency at the FDA and that there's a lot of red tape and compliance issues that can get them there faster. And here's the other thing. I'm also not a big pharmaceuticals medication guy anyway.
Mm-hmm.
We just did a big event in Portsmouth this past weekend.
I saw that.
Yeah, like on health and fitness. And oddly enough, like we'll put out something about China. We'll put out something on the economy, immigration. I'm getting maybe 50 to 100 engagement. The health and fitness thing, and all it was a picture of me standing up there talking. It's got like 380 like likes and comments. So clearly this healthy coalition stuff is stuff
big
that
hit.
people paying attention to. So I would rather see us focus on, instead of the medication to treat a symptom, let's start with some root cause stuff,
Mm-hmm.
right? So from that perspective too, when you talk about the FDA, I'd like to see us kind of move away from that big pharma, and really, I really like that MAHA movement.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a big health and fitness guy. I mean, I was an Army Master Fitness trainer. Like, this has been kind of my jam for, It's my therapy. It's what I do. And so, I eat healthy. I pay attention to this stuff, and honestly, I think that is one of the best things that somebody can do for themselves is pay attention to their macros, eat healthy, and and work out. And then maybe we can start to move away from this over medication that we've been at. So FDA is an interesting one. It's certainly something that I'm sure we can find efficiencies in. I'm sure there's better ways, and with different regulations. I heard some of these things with respect to within the chain, like there's some Buy American implications, whatever that looks like. There's a lot of different red tape that are driving drug prices up. And then how those get to people and how those get paid, that whole pharmacy model and the way insurance is paying into that. All of these things are adding on costs that are making drugs and stuff like that more expensive.
Do you think it's a conflict of interest for people that work in pharmaceutical companies to go and work at the FDA?
Yep.
And do you think that the government should put a stop to that?
Again, as a free markets guy, so again, I hate theoreticals because there's so many different ways. So you're saying someone that's at the FDA now going and working for a pharmaceutical company after?
Or vice versa?
I'm okay with that because they can't do it. You can't be in the same job, right? Like you can't be at the FDA and also on the board. But if somebody from Big Pharma went to FDA, I think you're getting a skill set, an understanding of how that works. And there's Sunshine Act regulations that, kind of do govern that relationship now, like what doctors and salespeople and insurance, how they can interact. So in your hypothetical, like if you were, let's say, Big Pharma, and you worked for the FDA, and I'm trying to okay, we're trying to expedite and get this new drug through the FDA process. I want to make sure we're doing everything the right way. What's the paperwork I need to fill? What's the process? What's the documentation that I need? What are the different tests and what are the efficacy levels that the FDA is going to be looking for? I would be okay with hiring you from the FDA to be like, hey, come over and you're going to be the project manager. We want to make sure that we do everything right. So I'm a first-time go through the FDA process. Totally cool with that because it's essentially, we're doing it the right way. We're trying to be efficient. But if you start breaking the rules though, and it's like, oh, well, call your buddy John and get John to sign off on that, that's an entirely different game. I'm totally against that, obviously. But
I guess a hypothetical that I'm thinking of is when the Sackler family was pushing OxyContin on Americans.
Yeah.
And they pretty much bought their way into the FDA, and they got it approved, and it killed millions of Americans, and now we have a huge drug problem.
Right.
And that's the downside of having industry and regulation. If we're going to have regulation, should the industry be able to infiltrate regulation in that way?
So there's a level of cynicism in the way that's. You can't stop people from, it's almost the same as if I worked in the military and now I'm going to go and work for Raytheon, right? Exact same situation, just different industry. When you go and work for Raytheon as a military officer, you understand warfighting capabilities, you understand what they're working on, how the military is going to evaluate that certain system, and then a lot of the military guys are serving as project managers there. So from that perspective, yeah, great. But in your OxyContin, obviously those guys were buying and they were cutting corners. They had people looking the other way. Like that's where compliance and that's where auditing needs to step in and make sure that people are playing within the rules. But you should be able to have lateral mobility. Like you worked in the government for 20 years. You understand the government's procurement process, what they're looking for, the problems they're trying to solve, gaps, all this. And now a company wants to hire them away to bring that kind of understanding to help them get something into market faster and the most efficient way. Again, as long as you're playing by the rules, I'm okay with that.
What are the rules, I wonder, when it comes to the FDA?
I don't know. Yeah,
maybe that should be outlined a little better, and there should be some penalties.
I'm sure there are rules, folks that are, again, that's just not the industry that I grew up in, so I couldn't really tell you that. But, I know the Sunshine Act governs a lot of that stuff.
So what would be your top 3 policy priorities for your...
I actually have 4.
Four.
Yeah. So, our first one is, kind of strong economy, strong country. A lot of different things that fall underneath that, right? We can come back and talk about that. Second one is protect our children. I highlighted that a little bit. And third is I want the United States to stand for something and to, be a leader on the world stage. Again, not fighting endless wars, but let's go in and let's make sure that we're shaping global policy that makes sure that the United States is not getting cut out and our principles are still being, kind of advanced around the world. And the last one is a return to normalcy, where we can get back and we could talk to each other, we could have good political discourse, and talk about the issues that are actually, meaningful, like the pronouns and, bathroom bills and all this other stuff that just seems so tangential and so far left. We get back to talking about, like, should Iran have a nuclear weapon? Or how do we fix the housing crisis? What do we do about our kids with this rising mental health? Or, there's so many other issues. I would like us to kind of dial it back into a little bit more core issues that affect everyday Americans and get to a point where we can start to, unite. Because without some type of, intention about bringing this country together, I think we just continue to kind of devolve. So those are my four main topics. And then obviously within each of those, we talked about, protecting children, Title IX stuff, social media, mental health, education. That fits underneath there. When we talk about the economy, it's empowering entrepreneurs, reducing, red tape and regulation that's hurting customers, hurting companies. Different types of economic, like we talked about, debt, all those different things. So that's how I'm kind of focusing this as my four, big topics, and then different policy agendas underneath that.
What do you think we can do to tackle the housing crisis then?
Housing is certainly a supply and demand issue. So, from the supply side. So, for one, raw materials and trades. So the average age of skilled labor in this country, 55 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And for every 5 that's retiring, only one's going in. Well,
yep.
That's, as you know, and I know, it's hard to find people to even do that work. And so we need to reinvest and prioritize skilled labor in this country. I think that helps. We keep coming back to government spending.
Yeah.
When you spend a lot of money, you drive inflation up, interest rates go higher, it makes housing less affordable, right? Because now I can't borrow as much as I could have. So if I have a $750,000 home in New Hampshire, which is where the prices have skyrocketed to, and it's at 8%, I can probably, let's say, only buy a $500,000 home. So just interest rates alone are outpricing people. The other thing, and I don't know if you're following this, but are you aware of what companies like Blackstone are doing with housing and single family homes?
Yeah, they're buying it all up.
They're buying it all up. Yeah. Now, again, free markets guy, but that one feels like it's outside of the playing field, because there are these tax codes called 1031 exchanges.
Okay, I never. Yeah.
Yep.
What is that?
So, let's say this place that we're in right now is income producing. You're renting it out to someone. You end up selling it for $200,000. You bought it for $100,000. You should pay capital gains taxes on that $100,000 profit you made. But if you buy instead within 6 months or a year, you take that $200,000 from the sale of this property and you invested it into another property, you don't pay any capital gains taxes on that $100,000 profit you made. So you've got companies like Blackstone are taking inventory of single-family homes off the market, basically creating an entirely new class of renter, to your point about the median age of renters.
Yep.
I think, what'd you say, it was 11%?
That was homeowners.
11%, right?
Yeah.
Homeowners. Well, Blackstone is a big part of causing a shift in that, because now these people have to rent because there's less stuff on the market. So we should not be, again, even though I'm a free markets guy, I don't think that we should be giving tax incentives to a major investment corporation like Blackstone to be tax sheltering all this money that they're making off of the buying and selling of single family homes which is reducing inventory.
I've heard that by 2030 they'll own 60% of all single-family homes in America.
I haven't heard that. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think actually Robert Kennedy was touting that during his campaign.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, interest rates have a lot to do with this, so that goes back to the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
So would you, I'm going to ask you this because I asked the last guy this, would you vote to audit the Federal Reserve?
Would I vote to audit the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, but if a bill ever came to you.
I probably would. Like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why not look at how all that stuff is? I mean, when you ask me that, my brain first goes to, man, how do you even start that process?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it would. I'd certainly be open to taking a look at how that stuff is is allocated, thought about. When was the last time we even did something like that?
We never have.
Right.
So it was created in 1913, and before that, it was up to the government to coin and mint our currency.
Mm-hmm.
And we gave that up to the Federal Reserve in 1913 on a 2/3 vote when most of the House was on Christmas vacation.
Is that right? That's the history of it, huh?
Yeah.
Huh.
There's a book called, I believe it's the Monster of Jekyll Island. Goes into all of that.
Huh.
Yeah.
All right.
So you've never looked into the Federal Reserve that in depth?
Not from an audit perspective. No.
You want the book?
Yeah, I'll take that from you after we get off the show. It'll be interesting to read through that.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
So I think that a lot of the discrepancies that we see, I mean, where we've lost more and more wealth from the lower classes to the upper classes. You must have heard the Agenda 2030.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. Well, this is how you do it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, if the majority of these companies are buying up single homes. When I was working on job sites during COVID, I would have contractors come up to me and say that somebody stopped by here and said, I want to buy this house. They don't even have the siding on it. They're wiring it maybe,
Yeah.
And the contractor would say, well, it's already sold.
Yeah. No. Oh, totally.
Then he says, well, I'll give you $50,000 over asking price. Well, they're already paying $50,000
in
over
cash.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you more. So it was really strange that all these. I've heard that story multiple times.
Me too.
I was looking at a house for a customer, and they said, "Yeah, some random person stopped by and said, I want to buy your house. I'll give you $50,000 over ask, or $50,000 over whatever it's valued.
Yeah.
Leave the furniture."
Just move out.
And they had been there all their lives.
Yeah.
And they said, "No, we're all set."
And to your point, so with that 1031 exchange with Blackstone,
Yeah.
so if I have $100,000 net profit, and I know I'm going to pay $20,000, $30,000 in taxes on that, I can afford to pay $20,000 or $30,000 over asking price
Mm-hmm.
because I'm going to write that off in taxes anyway. But you can't do that. I have an unfair advantage now as a corporation to overpay
Mm-hmm.
because that money is house money.
Mm-hmm.
It's either going to go to the IRS or I could outprice you, still netting 70, not paying any taxes on that, and I just added a second asset. So that's where it starts to get really unfair when you have this pool of money and tax shelter, and you're able to show up. It's me, Blackstone, with the suit, and you, who's going to win? I'm going to win every time.
Mm-hmm.
And now the government is also giving me some tax incentives. So that's something I think we can dial in.
We were in the housing market in 2023. That's when we bought this place, and it was a bloodbath.
Was it?
When we came here to look at this place, there were 20 cars lined up down the road.
Yeah.
And it's not a mansion,
Yeah.
and that was every house we looked at. This was the only one that sat for longer than a couple of weeks.
No, even way up here. So I live just, I'm down in Derry. So we're just like 5 miles over the Mass border. In the last 6 months, the neighbor on my left, her husband died. She sold her house. And 2 houses down, they just had an open house yesterday. Not kidding. There must have been 40 cars. I live on this quiet, a road like yours. 40 cars lined up on the road. Between 10 and 3, there was always people there. The house is already sold.
Wow.
It went on the market on Friday, open house on Sunday, and I drove by this morning on the way up here, and it was under contract.
No inventory.
Yeah, there's no inventory, and the house next to me sold for $80,000 over cash, 30-day close.
Do you think we'll see a financial crisis anytime soon?
Who knows, right? Like,
Because this
the
feels
bubble,
very 2008.
like, right? I don't know if we're at the bubble yet, right? I think high interest rates are going to kind of keep that down for a little bit. But here's the other thing: like, nobody expected COVID. If something like COVID comes out, or like where it disrupts, you could, right? Housing still hasn't come back. Like, inventory still isn't back, right? And so people are overpaying for these homes. Like,
They were before COVID.
yeah.
Yeah, there
Like-
was no inventory then. We were in quite the boom when I first started my business.
I think the last when people were just when building was crazy, it was like probably like 2007, right before the housing, collapsed.
This last 4 or 5 years is the busiest I've ever seen it.
Yeah.
I was working back then in construction, and it was busy back then.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, it wasn't.
Right.
I know that I can tell you right now, there's less building permits for new construction than there were 2 years ago. I just had this conversation with a builder today.
Huh.
They're seeing less new construction. They're seeing more renovations.
Yep.
So people are putting more money into their houses. I think COVID, when we printed all that money and pumped it in the economy, that's exactly where all that money went. It
That's
went
right.
to a lot of those companies like
Blackstone.
Blackstone,
Yeah.
Vanguard, and they just bought up as much equity, as many assets as they could with all that equity.
Yeah. Right. And again, unfair advantage.
Absolutely.
Because they
and
had
they gave
that cash.
And here's your $1,200 check.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So
Yep.
it's not right. And I think that the monetary policy that we get through the Federal Reserve, through a government that doesn't spend responsibly, is why we're here, and it's going to keep getting worse.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
Less and less people are going to own their own homes and be able to make it.
Homeownership is so important, for Americans have to have a way to build wealth. And this is the single biggest way for people to build wealth and, be able to retire and take care of their families or themselves when they get older.
But it has to go down for people to be able to access that too.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, high interest rates and all this other stuff that depletes that wealth that people have, and their single biggest asset that I think it's like, for 80 or 90%, like their home is their single biggest source of their wealth.
Mm-hmm. That's their biggest investment.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what do you think the federal government's role is in everyday lives of people in New Hampshire?
I wish they would get out.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the less government that we have in our lives, the better. I want you out of my pocket. I want you out of my lives. I want you to stop telling me how to live my life. Like, I love live free or die.
Mm-hmm.
It was when I first started looking at New Hampshire, I was like that motto first. I was like, well, I can get on board with that. And it feels like a lot less live free since I moved here, 20 years ago. So government encroachment, telling you how to live your life, take this shot, do this, don't say this, go in that bathroom. I'm good, man. Like, get out and then don't charge me for telling me all this stuff. Like, let me keep more of the money I make. I think your job is to keep us safe, create a fair and level playing field, and other than that, like, let me live my life. So from a very, very, very macro level, that's how I feel about the federal government.
What's your views on the Second Amendment?
Second Amendment, I think, is an insurance policy against a tyrannical and overarching government. And I saw that firsthand, right? Like, so walking patrols in Bosnia and Kosovo, and just seeing, like, in Bosnia, it was like almost 20 years to the day that I was over there, they hosted the Winter Olympics. And so think about that. You're center stage hosting the entire world, and then your country just collapses and you're in the middle of civil war and having to rebuild everything, right? I want to have the ability to defend myself, the ability to protect my family in the event that the balloon goes up, and I know the federal government or locals in that type of an environment is not going to be able to protect me.
Do you support it as it's written, or do you support any regulations on it at all?
I'm not crazy about, I mean, like in the military, if you get a, some type of an assault or any type of charge, they take your weapon away.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm okay with red flag laws, but there has to be some type of due process.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are inherently nuts and you've taken action already, we're like, all right, this guy's dangerous. I'm okay with you taking. I think you've given up your right at that point to own a firearm, but a judge needs to be involved.
You should have to commit the crime first.
Or you don't necessarily have to be murder, but if you were there, you know what I mean? Like these different, there's enough of these red flags. Exactly. And but it's got to be a judge too. It can't be a cop that was like, I saw you do this, and so we're taking your gun. Like, no, full process. But, and I think it's just a responsible gun owner to make sure that you're investing in yourself, in your training, in your education. But I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter. I'm a military guy. I carry myself, so.
Would you support repealing the NFA in 1934?
What's in that Firearms Act? I'm not sure. Like, what are you talking about specifically?
That's the ban on fully automatic weapons.
A ban on fully automatic?
Well, not a full ban. You have to go through the ATF. So basically, you could buy a fully automatic weapon without having to ask the ATF.
Yeah.
Which, to me, is in full support of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, the thing is like, I have to be for guns, and so if you're banning fully automatic weapons, I'm going to say, yeah, I'm not in support of that.
Yeah. Oh, and silencers are included in that as well.
Yeah.
Which a lot of older guys like to use silencers because
we were just on a range using a silencer. Yeah. No, like when you say ban, like I'm not for, like, so I'm for free and open weapons. The problem is,
should those be regulated?
I think there should be this is just my small sample size, but when I go to ranges, I see some of these people firing these things. I'm just this guy has no business having that kind of firepower. It's almost like I'm a pilot, like I'm a single engine pilot. I don't want to go and fly a jet. So I feel like some of these guys that have these things have no business doing it. I feel like they're a threat, to others on the left and right of this range. I watched a guy actually have a misfire, probably about 3 or 4 months ago. Like, didn't know how to clear his way. Like, bro, you're out there with this weapon just because you want to look tough. You have no business handling that weapon. So I don't want to ban it at a federal level, but I would almost like to see the NRA and the gun community itself put some positive pressure on people like that. But like, hey, man, you might want to think about getting into this course or doing this because you're irresponsible and you're giving us a bad name.
Maybe we should teach that in schools.
Teach firearms in schools? Nah.
Firearm safety? We used to, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, maybe here. I didn't grow up in New Hampshire, but I think schools need to focus on critical thinking, like preparing them. But if you're going to have a weapon, I think this is like there's some things that need to be legislated. There's other things I think that need to be handled outside of government.
Mm-hmm.
Not to open up a can of worms, but we start to talk about like abortion at this point. Like it's been legislated, been through the Supreme Court. So now, I think it's incumbent on church groups or women's groups. Let them advocate for it. Like, let's not legislate this anymore, and let's push it to the people that are passionate about it and can speak. And there's other ways to kind of influence change. And so, again, with guns, I don't want to see the federal government coming in and saying, you can't have this gun. Because God forbid, if the Chinese, with their force projection capabilities, someday on the 0.005% chance that they decide they want to come and invade the U.S., I want my weapon to be automatic when I'm firing back at them, right? But in the interim, while we're running around with all these automatic weapons out there, I would like to see some of these people be a little bit more responsible with their training, with how they're handling them when they qualify, those types of things.
And is that the government's role to do that?
No, I don't think it is. Yeah, I think it's the gun community's role to do that.
So you would support the repeal of the NFA?
I don't like these kind of like gotcha. I don't.
It's not a gotcha question.
I don't know the full the NFA Act.
Okay.
Right. So what'll happen is I'll be like, yeah, I support that, and then somebody will find some crazy clause that'll get clipped, and I'll be out there like, yeah, I support that.
I respect that.
Yeah. So without knowing everything that goes in there, but I am against kind of the federal government coming in and saying you can't have this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about national reciprocity for concealed carry?
I think that's a great idea. Case in point, I grew up in New Jersey and, People's Republic of Massachusetts. My dad had this like 1883 carbine rifle. It's cool, right?
Nice.
And I wanted to take it from when he lived with me for a couple months when I was out stationed in Missouri. They moved out there and lived with me. He was going to give me the gun. And but I had to drive it across here. There's a woman in New Jersey who was transporting a weapon, and she got pulled over by a Jersey State trooper. The fact that she had this gun in her car, she went to prison.
Mm-hmm.
And it took the governor, but she's probably spent months in jail, mother of 2 kids or whatever. And I thought like this is criminal.
Mm.
And so national reciprocity is a good thing because like I live 5 miles over the border. If I go from my house to an event in Portsmouth, I actually drive through Massachusetts.
Yeah.
495 so I go around. I could go to not federal, but I can go to state prison in Massachusetts for having a firearm on me that I'm trained and licensed and everything. All my paperwork is right in a state 5 miles north.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm a big supporter of that.
How about national concealed carry?
I'm a supporter of that too.
Nice.
You go through the paperwork. You're doing everything right. That to me falls within that like interstate commerce or like clause of the the Constitution where you should be able to go across state borders and not get jammed up for something that's totally fine in New Hampshire.
So in New Hampshire, you don't need a.
No, it's basically a right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we have that nationwide?
I do like some type of a check where you have to go and like at least apply for a permit. You have to apply for a permit to drive your boat here on Lake Winnipesaukee, right? Like, I struggle with this again because I don't like when the government tells you can't do anything, and it would really, it would piss me off to no end if they're like, hey, we don't agree with you're a Republican, the chief of police is a Democrat, we're not going to give you a weapon.
That happens all the time in Massachusetts.
I know. Right. And then it also becomes a political bargaining chip. So you're down in New York City, you want to get a gun permit, it's almost next to impossible. So it's just all the friends of the mayor or whatever. So I'm opposed to that. And so I think, again, macro level, I would start the conversation of being opposed to that. But with respect to weapons and a lot of these shootings and stuff that's going on and kind of just, again, firsthand experience, I shoot a lot. Just seeing some of the folks out there shooting with no real experience. Again, rather not be legislated federally, I wish groups like the NRA and other gun activists would maybe do a better job of encouraging their folks to stay more active and trained. But because there's no downside to being proficient on your weapon. If you're going to carry that, and you're going to have the ability to take a life with that tool, you need to know how to use it. So, but I don't want the government telling me I can't use it or I can't have it. So,
do you have anything that you would like to tell voters directly? Chris Bright running for Congress.
This is going to be a big race. We were in the White House about 6 weeks ago. They told us that this is one of their top 5 races in the entire country.
I'm glad you're on my podcast.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's good to be here. We need to talk about this stuff. And the NRCC also has this as one of their top seats. So what we're asking voters right now is, I know this is early to be talking congressional races, still 13 months out from even the primary election. But the Democrats are out there. There's already 6 in the race. And, honestly, people are still going to get in. I think it only costs like $60 to run for Congress. But, that window is rapidly closing. You're just going to need all that time to get out there and run. And if we really want to have a chance of winning this race, we're asking people to, make a decision sooner than they normally would and get behind a candidate because we've got a really good chance of flipping this seat for the first time in 8 years. But it's going to take us being mobilized. See, the disadvantage we had the last 8 years under Chris Pappas was he didn't have to run a primary. And so we would have these big primaries on the Republican side, 6, 8, 10 people. We'd all have to debate against ourselves and spend our money. And then by the time that candidate wins the primary, you have 6, 7 weeks to turn around and pivot and win a general. You're tired, you're out of money. Maybe, a couple negative attacks were landed on you by a Republican in your own party during the primary. And now you're expected to completely, pivot your message towards the independents who ultimately decide elections here in this state and raise money. So it's just not enough time. And we talked about moving the primary up. We talked about redistricting. The governor, just came out yesterday and said she's not going to support redistricting, which hurts us in CD1. And the primary isn't going to get moved for another couple years. So it's going to be more of the same. So in order for us to actually have a real chance of winning this party, this election, is we have to get behind somebody so we can use the next, right now it's 13 months. Make your decision, talk to candidates, and get behind a candidate so we can use the next 10, 11 months to really get our message out there and get some grassroots efforts to talk to voters and win this thing. And I certainly think I could do it. I ran last cycle, launched as a no-name. The joke was, Chris Bright, I never heard of her. And this time, like last June, first poll came out, we were like 0.0% name recognition. And that sucked, but at the same time, I was like, okay, we didn't have the money. The fundraising wasn't there for any candidate. Just because fundraising was a bit of an anomaly last year. Donald Trump was in town. He was running. Governor Ayotte was running, and all the money was kind of in those races. So we didn't have a ton of money in CD1 to really spend. So we didn't start really doing anything with respect to name recognition till around August. And then started bringing on like 100 new followers an hour across our social medias, and we really started to take off. And by the time that election line was snapped on September 10th, we were trending like this, and where the line was snapped, we just weren't there yet. So to get in this race early, to kind of build a coalition, we've got a lot of support. Right now we're sitting around 25, endorsements across the state Senate and state House. Got a lot of some pretty significant donors here in the state. We've got the momentum. Like, this is I feel good about our chance to win this thing, but we have to be eyes wide open. It's still a democratically leaning seat. Fortunately, the dominoes are playing out. Pappas stepped down, crowded Democratic primary fields. They're going to have to go on record. We're starting to bring in some donors. A lot of the things are trending our way.
Good.
We just need to make sure that we as a party come together. And it's important that, this primary that we're going to have is going to be a primary where we could talk about issues but not attack each other. Because it does nobody, the state, nobody, any good to have a very contentious, bloody Republican primary. We need to stick to the issues, we need to talk about it, and then we need to really focus on winning this seat.
Do you have any socials, website, anywhere you want people to go if they want to look into you more and support you?
Yeah, we have them all. chrisbright.org is the website. And then, Facebook, X, and Instagram, we all have active accounts. We have a YouTube account as well. So if you go into any of those platforms, just type in Chris Bright, NH, or Congress, we'll pop up.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for coming here and taking the time to sit down and answer some questions.
Appreciate it.
Have a conversation. And good luck to you in the primary.
Sounds good. Appreciate you having me.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.